Day 57 of This Is Not Advice. We're answering your questions about work, not giving you advice for what you should do, but just giving our views. And today, Min is going to give us her view on this question, which this is one people face a lot. We're talking about communications this week. What do I do if I think I'm being left out of a meeting or meetings?
Totally. I think happens, especially now, and you don't really know even if like people are in the hallways and meeting and gathering, and so you have no idea if people are like hopping into a Zoom, and so
no visceral sense of things.
Yeah. Well, so I've like 3 considerations, I think. Like, one is to understand like the context. How do you know you're being left out even, especially when you don't have the visceral elements? So do you know if this is like a recurring issue? Do you have visibility into other people's calendars and you feel like there are meetings where you think that you should be in the room and you're not? And so I think figuring out, understanding with yourself, like looking at all the data that you can have, like if there's a consistent pattern in which like there's a certain type of meeting or a certain group of people that you think that you should be collaborating with that you are not a part of.
I'm just curious, as you're talking about it, is there some meeting that you're thinking of that you wished you were in and got left out of that kind of like brings this up?
I think like earlier in my career, there were meetings where I probably where I was like the most junior person on the team or something. And so that kind of gets to the second point, which I think is understanding like, why is it important and why do you think that you should be in the room? And oftentimes I felt this because there were follow-ups from the meeting or tasks that were delegated to me, and I felt I was missing context, right? Or I didn't have all the information.
Reminds me of the DC license plate, no taxation without representation. And it's like, don't assign me any work if I don't have an opportunity to be part of the conversation about what work needs to be done.
Totally. And there are totally valid reasons for when there are meetings where it's just like key stakeholders and key decision makers in the room. And sometimes you don't want to have like a 20-person meeting or something like that. So I think also calibrating like the level of impact of why this is important. If the follow-up is like something that's like as simple as shooting off an email, like that might not be necessary for you to attend the 45-minute discussion about it. But if there's like material work that comes out of it, and you feel like you are in particular like lacking enough information, and you feel like you're having to get other people to repeat themselves, that's like a totally valid reason to go to my third point, which is like, what is the desired outcome for you? What is it about you being in this meeting that will materially affect like what happens afterwards? And so does it make sense for you to ask? And then I was curious from your perspective, I guess, how would you ask to be included in a meeting that somebody might not even recognize that you should have been a part of?
Yeah, it turns a lot on the reasons. So and the type of meeting, right? If there's a one-time meeting and you're not on the invitation list and you hear about it, it might just be an error. And you might just go to the admin who set it up, if an admin set it up, and be like, hey, was I supposed to be in that meeting? Or if they say, oh, I'm not sure, talk to such and such, you could just ask them and they'll be like, oh, shit, how did I forget to include you? For recurring meetings, that tends to be less of the issue. And then to me, it's about figuring out who has the power to put you in the room. Sometimes it could be your boss, sometimes it could be the host of the meeting, and explaining to them the reason why you think it's valuable. The most common error I think people make, though, as a CEO, people always come to me and be like, I want to be in the meeting. I'm like, why? Like, just don't consider it a blessing that you don't have to be in that meeting. Like, you could just go get some work done. Like, I want to not be in meetings now. But of course, the grass is always greener and, different perspectives. And so, it is literally just identifying the person in power and telling them the reason. Now, sometimes it won't even work on that. And you have to decide the importance to you. And so sometimes the answer is just show up. And that could burn bridges depending on it, especially if somebody said, no, don't come. But oftentimes if they didn't say it explicitly and you're just there, it might not be that big a deal. You have to use your judgment. I mean, one situation where that came up for me was I started a new job at News Corp. My project was to work with MySpace on something. I had spoken to the 2 co-founders of MySpace. The first day I started, I'd already spoken to them. I emailed them, no response. I called them. I talked to their admin. Nothing. It's like the end of my first day. My whole job is supposed to be working with them. We're supposed to be meeting the next day. And I was like, you know what? Forget it. I was in New York. and I figured out the company travel system and booked a flight and went to LA that night. And the next day I was in New York. I mean, in LA, and I showed up in their office and I was like, I'm here for the meeting. And it was awkward for about half an hour, but then after that, it worked great and we worked well together. They're just not the types of people who like responded to meeting requests. So that's what we did, you know? So you can always like, there's always another card to turn over. It's just which choice you want to make and when. That's how I think about it.
And for what it's worth, I think like especially now many of us are working at home. I think there's an openness about like our calendars and who's doing what at when, that I think just being explicit about the ask and like, hey, like saw that you're chatting with so and so. I think it's relevant for me because X. Do you mind if I join?
Totally. And open calendars is a big choice for organizations. I love them that we do them, but maybe that's a good question for another day. Today, I think I'll just say thank you to everybody for listening to our This Is Not Advice today. We are here every weekday this week talking about communication. We'll be back tomorrow. And Min and I work at Bloomberg Beta. We are startup investors in the future work. We share what we learn. And if you found this useful for yourself or for somebody else who was just asking you this question, share it with them. And please ask us more questions. Pretty much all our questions now are coming from things we hear from people. So that might as well be you.
Great.
Thanks, Min.
Bye.
Thanks, everybody.